No fear. No political correctness. No wokeism. You're listening to Underground USA.
Thanks for downloading, listening, and sharing. My name is Frank Salvato, and you're spending a few moments in Underground USA. Before we get into this segment of America's Third Watch, I want to comment on the recent French elections and why they are important in the run-up to the 2024 general elections here in the United States. We just witnessed a political paradox in France. Conservatives tallied the most votes, but the socialists of the Macron government won power in the French National Assembly. This is a byproduct of creating voting schemes that seek equitable outcomes instead of representative or democratic ones. As reported by the leftist and all too often propagandistic Associated Press, quote, "A leftist coalition, the New Popular Front, has won the most seats in the 2024 French legislative election, beating back a far-right surge by failing to win a majority. The outcome leaves France facing the stunning prospect of a hung parliament and threatens political paralysis in a pillar of the European Union." They had just days to come together. The leaders of France's left-wing parties have acknowledged they made compromises to unite in an effort to keep the far-right National Rally Party from taking power in France. The New Popular Front, named after a similar coalition formed in the 1930s against the rise of fascism in France, includes environmentalist parties, the French Socialists and Communists, and the far-left France Unbowed Party. So, the far-right National Party led France's snap elections on Sunday with 33% of the vote, with the leftist alliance New Popular Front following in second place at almost 28%, and President Macron's ruling coalition trailing in third place with 20%. Yet, after the second round of voting, the results showed just over 180 seats for the New Popular Front leftist coalition, Macron's ruling coalition with more than 160 seats, and the far-right National Rally Party diminished to a restricted third place with just over 140 seats. France will have a hung parliament because of the system, not the voters. The French election system, strategic voting, and the increased popularity of other parties contributed to the conservative bloc winning a majority of votes but losing seats in the 2024 legislative elections. The French election system is a hybrid system that combines elements of both the first-past-the-post and proportional representation methods. The country is divided into 577 electoral districts, and each district elects a single representative to the National Assembly, the lower house of the French Parliament. Candidates who receive an absolute majority of votes in the first round of voting are elected outright. If no candidate achieves this majority, a second round of voting takes place between the top two candidates, and the candidate with the most votes in the second round is elected. In the 2024 legislative elections, the conservative bloc, which primarily consists of the Republicans and the Union of Democrats and Independents, won a majority of votes. However, they lost seats in the National Assembly. Seem inequitable? Does it seem like the far-left stated electoral goal of one person, one vote is being tortured? You wouldn't be wrong. By all intents and purposes, the conservative bloc in France won the election and, by right, that majority should mandate the country's direction. But a system designed to provide diversity, equity, and inclusion has put the fundamental task of free elections on its head. The winner loses, and the losers, well, win. The conservative bloc lost seats in the National Assembly due to several factors. Some voters who preferred the conservative bloc chose to vote for other parties in the first round to prevent the far left or the far right candidates from advancing to the second round. This strategy, known as tactical voting, can lead to a discrepancy between the popular vote and the number of seats won. In the 2024 elections, several minor parties gained significant support from voters. This shift in voter preferences resulted in a more fragmented political landscape, making it more difficult for the conservative bloc to secure a majority of seats in the National Assembly. And while the French electoral system primarily relies on the first-past-the-post method, a small number of seats are allocated using proportional representation. This element of the system favors smaller parties which may have received a significant share of the vote, but were not successful in winning individual electoral districts. Put succinctly, even though these smaller parties lost, because it's all about equity, don't you know, they are awarded seats to the detriment of others. Now, this is important because we're seeing the metastasizing of this contrived equity scheme in U.S. voting systems across the country. The French system of elections and the voting system in Alaska and Maine share some similarities, particularly in their use of hybrid electoral methods. Alaska's system combines elements of first-past-the-post, or ranked choice, and proportional representation to determine the outcome of elections. In Maine, a ranked choice system is used exclusively. In the 2020 elections, Alaska adopted the new ranked choice voting scheme for its state and federal elections. Under this system, voters rank candidates in order of preference. If a candidate receives an outright majority of the first-choice votes, they're declared the winner. If no candidate achieves a majority, the candidate with the fewest votes is eliminated and their votes are redistributed to the remaining candidates based on voters' second-choice preferences. This process continues until a candidate reaches a majority of votes. Both the French and Alaskan electoral systems aim to provide a, quote, more equitable, unquote, representation of voter preferences by combining first-past-the-post and proportional representation methods. Of course, the arbiters of what is equitable are almost always the power-connected. As of now, Maine is the only U.S. state that uses a pure ranked choice voting scheme for its federal elections, including presidential, congressional, and U.S. Senate races. Several cities and municipalities across the United States, in California, Minnesota, New Mexico, Maryland, and Massachusetts, also use ranked choice voting for local elections, doing so under the strained guise of promoting more diverse representation, reducing negative campaigning, and ensuring that elected officials have broader support from their constituents. I don't see how that stopped negative campaigning on the left, but hey, orange man bad. Of course, this gerrymandering of votes flies in the face of the left's demand for one person, one vote, as screeched by the likes of Hillary Clinton, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and the Squad, and Bernie Sanders. This is why voting integrity must be a primary concern here in the United States. The media and the left are quick to condemn those who identify serious issues with their ever-expanding voting schemes. But if we don't dig in our heels and make a hard "you shall not pass" stance to protect free and fair, purely democratic elections seated in a system that values apportionment exclusively in the Electoral College, we'll end up like France, a conservative nation with a radically Marxist government run by globalists. When we come back, our segment on America's Third Watch, broadcast nationally from our flagship station WGUL, AM 860 and FM 93.7 in Tampa, Florida.
You're listening to Underground USA.
When someone is having a stroke, every minute counts. Just as putting out a fire quickly can stop it from spreading, treating a stroke quickly can reduce damage to the brain. The clock begins ticking as soon as you spot the signs of a stroke. because some treatments can only be used if the patient reaches the hospital in the first 3 hours after symptoms appear. So don't wait. Call 911 right away and get the person to a hospital immediately, even if the symptoms go away. If you think someone is having a stroke, remember the word FAST. F is for face. Ask the person to smile and check whether one side of their face is drooping. A is for arms. Have the person raise both arms and see if one arm drifts downwards. S is for speech. Ask the person to repeat a short phrase and notice if their words sound slurred. And finally, T is for time. If you spot any of these signs, call 911 right away to get the person to a hospital fast. Strokes are medical emergencies. The sooner a patient gets treatment, the better their chance of a good recovery.
News, insight, passion. AM 930, The Answer.
Frank, it's hope that you had a great 4th of July, by the way. How was your weekend?
It was explosive.
Well, I can imagine. I'm telling you, there was stuff going on all around my home. It was just every 4th of July. It's just it is really something. But they've got these fireworks that sound like just they detonate and they really shake things. It's just amazing.
Well, the sound of freedom is something that comes in many different varieties.
Indeed, it does. You're right, and it was good to see that people were having a great time celebrating and. Even in neighborhoods, and you could kind of hear it outside. There was this rumbling. It's like rolling thunder, but so many people were setting these things off all over the place, and hopefully people had a time to reflect on what this all means. Don't you think?
Well, that's the big thing here. It's did they reflect on what it means? It's one thing to celebrate a day off or 2 days off that we get with this when it falls on a Thursday. But what it means is more important. What it celebrates is more important, and that's individualism, freedom from tyranny, and Americanism. And a lot of people don't carry that idea with them into the rest of the year. And we need to start doing that because we've ceded a lot of our freedoms to the government. In the government's quest to centralize, in the far left's quest to centralize government in Washington, D.C. We were never meant to be that way. We were meant to be 50 separate states, 13 in the beginning, of course, with 50 separate constitutions. There were 50 laboratories for different thoughts that would trickle up to the federal level in what works best for the people. So, we've gotten so far away from that it's we need another ideological revolution. We don't need to get muskets and gunpowder this time, but we do need to make sure that we control what our government does at the ballot box.
Well, sure. Now, you mentioned a key word, and that was tyranny. And it seems to me, Frank, that because you have the Mount Olympus model now of government, with Mount Olympus being in Washington and everything sort of proceeds down from the mountain down to the rest of us, right? But people seem to, unfortunately, sometimes even prefer that or think that is the way it's supposed to be. Everything is a federal issue as opposed to what you're talking about, especially in, your city council or your county board of supervisors. They have a lot more impact on your life. They're much closer to you.
No, absolutely. And that's the way it was meant to be. The government that touches your life the most is supposed to be the closest to you so that when they decide to get tyrannical, you can change them easily. When you centralize and homogenize power at the highest level, it becomes almost impossible to change anything. We're seeing that now. The federal government has exploded into the bureaucratic deep state, and people recognize it, but they say, what can I do? Because it's impossible to slay the beast unless you bring someone to Washington who is a wrecking ball, or unless the states start taking back power from the federal government, whether it's by legislation themselves, nullification, or they've got to rebel. We did it once in 1861. I hope it doesn't come to that again. But with an out-of-control federal government, when's the last time, Kyle, that you heard them announce that they were repealing a law?
Yeah, never.
Yeah. So they go to Washington to create laws and create regulations to justify their existence, because then they can go back to their district saying, my name is on this law. I did this. Well, sometimes it's best for government to do nothing or shrink. And right now, under the Biden administration, our government's exploded. As a matter of fact, it's affecting the economy. We now have a U.S. government-fueled economy when it comes to jobs and employment. Oh, that's outrageous.
Yeah, but it gets everybody much more dependent on Washington. And also it's a way to, try to influence or, for votes and so forth, special interest groups, ethnic groups, whatever group you want to come up with. It's like, look what I'm going to do with my federal government money that I have.
Well, and that's they suck you into dependency by giving you things that you get used to. Federal government, centralized government has the illusion of being easier for you, but it robs you of your freedoms.
Again, this idea of July the 4th, this idea of the Declaration of Independence, this idea of the rights that we have that we're endowed by our Creator with these rights. Now, this goes against the grain for the liberal left or the ideological left. They really want to come up with the rights and take them away, almost out of whim, depending on what their ideology says. But we're really coming from a much different base in terms of where we even obtain these rights.
I think the best definition I've heard of what the left is today is neo-Bolshevik. Mm-hmm. And I use that literally because these were the people during the Russian Revolution who believed full faith in the Marxism that was being shopped to them. Right now, what we describe as the far left in the United States, they are seated and steeped in Marxism. That's when you look at AOC and the Squad and Bernie Sanders, to a large extent, Hillary Clinton, when you read her thesis and understand her political ideology, her college thesis from Wellesley, it's steeped in Marxism, in communalism, and that's not what we are. So, yeah, when you look at the tenets of Marxism, or neo-Bolshevikism, as it were, there is no God in Marxism. The state is the alpha and the omega. Mm-hmm. Marx he was an atheist. They didn't think anything about rights coming from being inalienable. It was what was best for the community, what was best for the people, and not the little people either, the people who ran everything. So, yeah, when you look at the left, they believe they bestow rights. That's why you hear the loudest voices during any movement saying, well, healthcare is a right. Abortion is a right. It's a right. All of these things are rights. They've deemed it so that these are the rights. And with that, their perceived ability to give rights can be taken away. That's why they believe the Constitution is malleable and almost rendered to just a list of suggestions is the Bill of Rights. Yeah, you can own a gun, but not that one, and not this one either. And your magazine it can only hold this many bullets, and your free speech? Well, yeah, you've got free speech, but you can't really say this because that's a hate crime. With the ability to declare rights for everybody, they also decide which rights are good and which rights are bad, the established rights, and we'll take care of that for you because we've got a centralized government. And we don't have to worry about convincing 50 separate, smaller, inferior peon governments in the states. We will just decree it at the federal level and you'll obey.
Right. Well, exactly. And certainly this whole thing, again, about making it sound like, hey, everything we're doing for you or suggesting through this neo-Bolshevikism, basically, or the idea of being a Marxist, it's like, oh, well, this is, we're creating a utopia. But also, Frank, there's these labels, that people will hear, these terms like Marxism, and does it just kind of pass right over them because it's almost like, oh, well, that's like a historical thing. We don't have Marxists here. I mean, you were calling Hillary Clinton like a Marxist. Well, in other words, there's almost a disconnect, like it can't really be that bad, but it is that bad, though.
No, this is what happens when society creates this need for families to be disengaged from providing proper oversight to their government. The framers were very clear on this, and there's no arguing it. If you want to keep your freedom, you've got to be vigilant. Period. Dot. Mm-hmm. And as a society today, and over the past, I'll say 100 years, ever since Wilson and the introduction of, we'll just get experts to tell us what to do. Ever since that started, which is Marxian, by the way, mm-hmm. Ever since that started, we've seen the bureaucracy explode, and now, hey, we're going to shut down government. What stops? Mm-hmm. The government doesn't stop. As a matter of fact, they get overtime to put up barriers so you can't go to parks.
Yeah, you can't see the Grand Canyon from the highway because it's a government shutdown. I couldn't get over that.
Yeah, and you can't go there because, well, you're just a citizen. You're just an American. You can't go to places in America when we decide that you can't, so that we can make a political point based in ideology. This is exactly what Washington was talking about in his farewell address when he talked about the dangers of factions. He was talking about political parties. When they come into existence and potency at the national level, they'll destroy the republic, and they are. And I'm equally as critical of political parties on the right and the left. The left are diabolical. The right's got a real big intellect problem in leadership because they don't even know how to message well.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah, the Democrats have messaging down to a T.
No, they've been even as late as Obama. They were touching every single American. If you kept an eye on what they were doing with the Analyst Project, you saw them. They figured out how to use psychology, political psychology, to touch every single voter in the United States. Fox had a huge segment on it during the last election, Obama's last election, and nobody paid attention to it. But it was an absolute psyops campaign that succeeded because they pressured people, non-committed voters, into voting for them through shaming them about what their neighbors would think. Now, when you're doing psyops on your own people, and the other side doesn't know how to message, you're naturally going to win, to the astonishment of people who thought the election was in the bag. And that's why when everyone's going, oh, Biden's out of it, he's running Trump, he's going to mop the floor with him. Well, be careful. This is when that vigilance has to take place. You can't let up on the throttle right now. It's got to be a landslide victory, and that means getting people to the polls who aren't rah-rah Trump right now. You've got to talk politics and religion with your neighbors and your families and your friends.
Yeah, well, the alternative, because we keep hearing about the idea that there could be a replacement. That would bring, naturally it would bring some energy to the campaign because it would all be brand new and this kind of stuff. The media would just go bonkers about it. But those same effects would still keep destroying our country. We'd still keep dissolving the border. We'd still have a terrible economy. wars would continue and probably get worse, and on it would go.
Well, for example, if we brought in Gavin Newsom, he brings the absolute poison that destroyed the Golden State, that decimated San Francisco, into Washington. So the replacement would be worse. Kamala Harris, again from the Golden State, would be worse than what we have now. And the media and the Democratic National Committee's messaging machine would just say, well, we've gotten rid of all the bad stuff. This is all brand new. It's morning in America again. And they'd plagiarize from Reagan.
Right. We do have a caller holding on, but before we get to the caller, I do want to get your take on the Stephanopoulos interview with Joe Biden. One particular thing, when he asked, did you watch the debate, basically to see how terrible it truly was? And Biden answered, I don't think I did. I knew we were going down a bad road right at that point as well. What do you think?
Well, the interview just kind of put an exclamation point at the end of the debate performance.
Yeah.
And it also did lay a little suspicion of the failure at the feet of the handlers. If they've been saying for the last, now I'm going to go 7.5 years, orange man bad, why would you paint the guy up orange?
Right. No kidding. Yeah, you're right about that with his comments. Yeah, that was just crazy.
They used spray tan on Biden to make him look a little healthier than he was. And they did exactly what they were making fun of Trump for doing, only Trump's was real because he's a redhead.
Right.
So these people go, it's working for Trump. Let's make him orange. I mean, these people, the strategists behind Joe Biden, the narrative creators, Obama 2.0, they've got no imagination and they are panicking because they're seeing power slip away. It's going to get nastier before November. Mark my words.
Well, how much power do you think is being or can be brought to bear on Biden? I mean, after all, when all is said and done, he's the president of the United States. Dr. Jill, of course, I think is building that bubble all around him even stronger than before. But what's the tipping point, do you think, in all of this to get him either to not run or resign, or what do you think?
Well, you can't take anything off the table, including using the leverage of, we'll make sure your son gets convicted and goes to jail, Joe.
Mm.
That's why the first family can't have people in this position, because political pressure can be applied nefariously, and the left does it with aplomb. So there's a bunch of things that they can pressure him on, especially now that they've tried to say, we can sue ex-presidents for things that weren't official. Yeah, the Supreme Court has said that point blank. Yeah, you can go after an ex-president for things that weren't officially done in the name of the presidency. You mean like accepting money from Ukraine and China?
That's right.
So yeah, there's a lot of pressure they could put on him, and a lot of it has to do with the things they let him get away with.
Well, no, you're right about that. And it just seems, going into this convention, let's just flip the script. If this was happening to the Republican Party with the sitting Republican president, same problem, the whole thing, the story would just be they're tearing each other apart every day. The media doesn't seem to be going that direction just yet, but I can't imagine what this convention looks like.
Well, and this is when the question needs to be asked full-throatedly and loudly, and we need to demand the answer. Who are the puppet masters?
Mm-hmm.
It's not just the deep pockets. There are some nefarious political players here. Who are they? We want to know who they are. Did you know that Anita Dunn is still a senior White House advisor to Joe Biden? This is the woman who's an avowed Marxist who was raked over the coals during the Obama administration for being outed as a devout Marxist. She never left the White House.
Yeah. This is again. Yeah. See, people again. If these labels that we hear and this kind of stuff, and people say, "Well, it's just another thing," but it's not. It's antithetical to our very way of life.
Well, and this is why we have the radically left policies coming out of the White House, because we have an honestly Marxian staff there, senior staff, that's puppet stringing a cognitively declined president. This is why this is happening. We allowed Obama 2.0 to come back in. They're Marxists, people.
Yeah, I mean, this is very, very serious stuff. Well, Frank, we've got Eric in Tennessee holding on the line. I think he's got a question or a comment for you this morning. Good morning, Eric. You're on with Frank Silvato.
Hey, good morning, Kyle. Thanks again. Good morning, Frank. Hey, real quick, Frank, you were talking about the Fox News special back in circa 2020, how that there was used psychological manipulation. I've long been of the opinion that there's an actual psychological warfare campaign, otherwise known as an influence operation, that has been going on directed at the American people by elements within the U.S. government and other entities associated with the high-level intelligence organizations. Let's just call it, for the sake of argument, let's just call it the CIA and keep it simple, that has been directed at this, at us. I believe that Fox's position, it didn't go far enough, because that is based on the supposition that the last election was square and fair and right up the middle, nonpartisan. And I'm just, I'll leave that end of it. The true believer of these Marxist, revolutions, if you will, the only identity, they've been stripped of any other individual identity. And the only identity they have is that of the group, and whatever identity the group is wearing, showing at that time. This is it's a being of nothingness, and nothingness becoming the being, that it's a top-down push, that they plant the seeds and give fertilizer to the dirt, and the dirt sees the seed grow and say, we did it. And then it's reinforced by the farmer saying, yeah, you dirt, you did a really good job growing this seed, when it was completely synthetic and artificial from the beginning. So going back to our, right-wing leadership, I'm just using right-wing for colloquialism, for the right wing, the left can't meme, but they're in charge of everything. So I'm just going to leave it. Thanks for letting me give my opinion on that, and I look forward to any response. Thanks.
Thanks, Eric. Appreciate it. Eric in Tennessee. Yeah, Frank, what do you think?
Yeah, he's right. Let's and it was called the Analyst Institute, and it was with regards to Obama's second election. The right had something they were trying to get off the ground in voter messaging, and it failed miserably during the Romney campaign. But if you read or listen to Robert Malone, Dr. Robert Malone, the same guy who was protesting COVID, who got raked over the coals by the federal government as a liar and a disinformationalist, who now turned out to be absolutely correct in just about everything. He talks about fifth generation warfare, and that's what's being done today. And it's targeting the American people. It's coming from the deep state bureaucracy. This is our government is not our friend today. It's just a fact. They want to manipulate you into thinking a certain way and acting a certain way. And Americanism as individualism, they want to kill it. They want to kill it. You can't think this way. You can't. How many different ways from Sunday has the Biden administration said you can't think that way? You have to accept pronouns. You must accept somebody's pronouns. I don't have to accept Jack. I really don't.
Well, yeah, you have to comply. It's compliance. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have to. I don't have to. But you can say that you want to be an end table. Good. Enjoy your end table life. I don't have to recognize you as such. And you can't force me to do it. But we've got a government in power that's saying, you have to. You have to.
You have to support it. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. If you don't believe in these rights for this special interest group, then we're going to come after you. We're going to make a law. We're going to make a law that says you must believe. Well, no, I don't. Bite me.
All right. I love it, Frank.
If you like the podcast, please rate it and comment if your platform lets you. Go over to undergroundusa.com and subscribe to the Substack. and pick up your copy of Nullification, available on Amazon. But more importantly, talk to your friends, family, colleagues, and acquaintances about politics and religion. Do it calmly and employ facts over emotion. You'll be surprised how much you have in common with a great many of those you talk to. It's something we can all do to preserve the Republic. My name is Frank Salvato, and you're listening to Underground USA.